Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur Srila Prabhupada ki Grantharaj Shrimadbhagavatam ki Samarada Bhakti Tagore Premanande. All glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to Shishi Guru Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Diriye Astaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhaktir Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. Reading from Grantharaj Shrimadbhagavatam, Chapter 1, Text 12, Canto 1, Chapter 12, Text number 5. Sampadaha Katavo Loka Mahishi Prataro Mahi Jambudeva Padiyam Patyam Cha Yasascha Tridivam Gatam Sampadaha Kratavo Loka Mahishi Brataro Mahi Jambudvipadipathyam Cha Yasascha tridivam gatam.
Yashascha trividam gatam.
Sampadaha kritavo loka.
Sampada kritavo loka.
Mahishi brataro mahi.
Mahishi brataro mahi.
Jambu dvipadipatyam cha.
Jambudvipadipatyam cha.
Yasascha tridivam gatam.
Yashascha trividam gatam. Sampada kritava loka.
Sampada kritavo loka.
Mahishi brataro mahi. Jambudvipadipatyam cha. Yashascha tridimam gatam. Sampada kritavo loka. Mahishi brataro mahi. Jambudvipadipatyam cha. Yashascha tridimam gatam.
Sampada, opulence. Kritava, sacrifices. Loka, future destination. Mahishi, the queens. Bratara, the brothers. Mahi, the earth. Jambu Dvip, the globe or planet of our residence. Adipatyam, sovereignty. Cha, also. Yasha, fame. Cha, and. Three, Divam, celestial planets. Gatam, spread over. Translation in purport by His Divine Grace of Vaicharana in the Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. News even reached the celestial planets about Maharaj Yudhishthira's worldly possessions, the sacrifices by which he would attain a better destination, his queen, his stalwart brothers, his extensive land, his sovereignty over the planet Earth, and his fame, etc. Purport. Only a rich and great man's name and fame are known all over the world. And the name and fame of Maharaj Yudhishthira reached the higher planets because of his good administration, worldly possessions, glorious wife Draupadi, the strength of his brothers Bhima and Arjuna, and his solid sovereign power over the world, known as Jambudvip. Here the word lokaha is significant. There are different lokas or higher planets scattered all over the sky, both material and spiritual. A person can reach them by dint of his work in present life, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:25. No forceful entrance is allowed there. The tiny material scientists and engineers who have discovered vehicles to travel a few thousand miles in outer space will not be allowed entrance. That is not the way to reach the better planets. One must qualify himself to enter into such happy planets by sacrifice and service. Those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded into animal life, to suffer more and more the pangs of material existence. And this is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 16:19. Maharaj Yudhishthira's good sacrifice and qualifications were so lofty and virtuous that even the residents of the higher celestial planets were already prepared to receive him as one of them. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sagana Lalitam Shri Vishakan Vitam Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Radhe Shri Vishnapana Yoside Khaija Kalpatu Vyasta Kupasindu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirshri Shasuni Bali Pascharcha Deshta Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vedikara Sivasani Chugauravanta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Ram. News even reached the celestial planets about Maharaj Yudhishthira's worldly possessions, the sacrifices by which he would attain a better destination, his queens, his stalwart brothers, his extensive land, his sovereignty over the planet Earth, and his fame, etc. So, this is the chapter describing the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, and the sages again are gathered in Naimisharanya. So we keep going back and forth between these two parallel dialogues. The dialogue between Shukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, and then Sutta Goswami explaining this dialogue to the sages at Naimisharanya. And Shaunak Rishi has opened this chapter wanting to know more about Parikshit Maharaj. This is the great mystery for us. We see there's a natural tendency to want to know about other great personalities, right? You go to people write biographies on persons, and there is great demand to know about the greatness of somebody's life. In some ways it serves as inspiration, maybe satisfies a natural curiosity. So in our Vedic process also, the study of great personalities is very important for us in our spiritual life, because it sets for us a great set of examples of how to live our life, how one can find perfection, and also what is the result of a spiritually centered life. Because one of the fears we have when we first come to Krishna consciousness, we hear about the need to detach from the material world. And that detachment feels very painful, right? Because I don't want to give up my intoxication, I don't want to give up, my meat eating, my gambling, my illicit sex. These are it's too much. My whole life is surrounded on them. How I can give up these activities? I'm happy to add Krishna, but I don't want to give up these other things. So, but when we study the prior great acharyas and great devotees, we see the result that when they had given up these material attachments, what they had gained. We're always interested, what's in it for me? So if I'm going to give up these things for Krishna, what is my gain? And so this is one common misconception in spiritual life, is that by detaching from our material affairs, I'm going to lose something. But in reality, we know when we surrender these, pieces of broken glass, as Dhruva Maharaj says, these material wealth and opulences, we actually obtain real diamonds, the love of Krishna. This is the real achievement. But that's a little distant for us, so we have to step our way to that. And the second thing that we see in studying the life of great devotees is that devotional service is not an idle activity. Again, the mundaners will criticize. You Hare Krishna devotees, you're not doing anything productive in society. You're not helping to advance society. You're just leeching off of society. In this way, what contribution are you making? This is very, prevalently being discussed during the boom of Srila Prabhupada's movement. And there's one very famous interview between a Canadian broadcaster and His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. This was in the early 80s. And it's a very fiery conversation. Very, very wonderfully done. And this news anchor is, sort of criticizing that the devotees are not doing anything good for society. They're not working. They're not making money. They're not making things in the factories. And in fact, they're just a nuisance to society. So these sorts of things manifest in people's consciousness. But when we actually study, we see that the pure devotee is able to accomplish extraordinary things even in this material world. Though that is not their goal, their objective, they perform extraordinary activities and in fact contribute to society far more than the mundane materialists. And this is another great example of Maharaj Yudhishthira. That his leadership of the world was so extraordinary that it says the news had reached other planets. How many of our great kings and presidents and prime ministers are ruling in such a way that other planets are taking note? Anybody? No. We may, do some great activity, and if a few people in our community know, we are happy with that fame. But if we go a little further and say, okay, now the whole country is aware of my contributions, that's becoming fame. And maybe the topmost we might achieve is global recognition. Everybody around the world knows Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mukesh Ambani, all these people. People know these great, contributors to the world. But who in the celestial planets is being celebrated for their contributions? Nobody. But Yudhishthira Maharaj is ruling in such an extraordinary way that the quality of his rule, the fame, the celebration of that had reached even the celestial planets. So this is the perfection of devotional life. That when we live, when we become a pure devotee of the Lord, one not only understands how to make one's way to the spiritual world, but one also understands how to utilize this material world for its best purpose. This material world is a creation of Krishna. So it also can be administered in a way to also create great results. And Maharaj Yudhishthira, his fame was because of his good administration. Prabhupada writes that Maharaj Yudhishthira the fame of Maharaj Yudhishthira reached the higher planets because of his good administration. Worldly possessions, glorious wife Draupadi, the strength of his brothers Bhima and Arjuna. So Yudhishthira Maharaj is ruling with Krishna in the center. Not his false ego, not his desire for power, his desire for authority, his desire for material opulence, royal palaces and many queens and all the accoutrements of royal life. No. He was ruling as a service in a fully detached mood. He was attached to Krishna. So attachment to Krishna does not mean, abandoning one's worldly duties. Yudhishthira Maharaj is ruling as a king, as an obligation of service to Krishna. And this is why his ruling was so sound. Because he was ruling based on what is best for society. How many of our rulers are truly ruling in this way?
maybe one.
Yeah, maybe. Very, very hard to find that this consciousness is there. And so, in fact, we don't find fame, we find infamy, We find that because of such rascaldom behaviors, that the news spreads that this person did this and this person did this. So, Maharaj Yudhishthira was able to even go beyond this material world. And this is there's a famous conversation between, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on the name. Asked a question to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Drawing a blank. But the question was asked about the fame. Who has real fame? And the answer is that the devotee is one who has enduring fame. Enduring fame. The materialist, might have some fame for some period of time, but after one generation, 2 generations, it is forgotten. We all know the richest man in the world today, but who was the richest man in the world 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago? We forget. That's not so important. But these great saintly personalities, we remember. We know for generations and generations, because they are truly contributing to society. So, one's richness and greatness in the service of Krishna is enduring. And this again gives us further, evidence of the power of spiritual life. So while the materialists are, eager to acquire fame and power and wealth, the devotee is one who is actually able to acquire this fame, power, and wealth. But they want none of it, and that's the conundrum. The more we want and aspire for it, the less we get. And the more that we just want Krishna's fame to be spread, Krishna's energy to be spread, his opulences to be known, the more Krishna reciprocates upon us. So, this is the perfection of spiritual life. And so anyone who can claim or claims that, that spirituality, doesn't lead to anything productive is wholly misinformed. When Lord Ramchandra was ruling in India, and he was ruling the whole world, there was such a perfection of administration that even people did not get sick. Furthermore, people didn't die until they were ready to die. Now, what kind of rascal, as Prabhupada would write, demon leaders can deliver that type of outcome to society? If they could, how much difficulty they'll have to find re-election? Will they have to spend millions and millions of dollars convincing people to vote for them? If they can deliver a society free of disease, free of quarrel. Lord Ramchandra had an open door policy. You could go and file any complaint you have to him directly. Imagine if our presidents and kings and prime ministers did that. They would have no time to rule. They would just have to hear all the complaints. Right? So, this is how, the great kings, Maharaj Yudhishthira was ruling the whole world. His sovereignty was over the whole world. It was one kingdom. How he could do that? Because the other local kings, they were anxious to relinquish their ruling and work under Maharaj Yudhishthira, because they knew that his administration was so good that it would benefit them. And there were some few rival kings who were not ready to surrender because they were greedy for power, not greedy for the goodness of citizens, and they were quickly defeated by great warriors like Bhima and Arjuna. So Yudhishthira Maharaj's ruling is not, he has to exercise strength sometimes. If you're not willing to surrender, let's fight. But most were ready and eager because his rule was so good. So this is the practical excellence of devotional service. And where Maharaj Yudhishthira learned his ruling from Shastra, from scriptures. The best way to govern society is given in our scriptures. No other way. So we should understand in whatever, position we have, that our best contribution to society is going to be through living a Krishna-centered life. When I bring Radha Kunj Vihari into the center of my life, then my activities become actually meaningful, actually fulfilled. Otherwise, it's a futile attempt. So devotional service is not something, that we relegate to some corner of society and that the rest of the world has to function. No. The function of the world is best situated when it is done under service to Krishna. And Maharaj Yudhishthira proves this. And it was so effective that even the demigods in the celestial planets, who are rulers, they're ruling big chunks of this universe, are in awe of Yudhishthira Maharaj's rule. Because even the demigods, they are not pure devotees of the Lord, Prabhupada explains. They have some desire for this opulence, for this power. They are operating on a much more pious level than, most. That piety, what does piety mean? Because pious means that one follows the regulations of Shastra for their enjoyment. We call it regulated sense enjoyment. And the Vedas primarily speak of this, karma kanda. So, if I want to enjoy materially, I can either do whatever I want, or I can follow the scriptures to get my enjoyment. If I do what I want, this is vikarma, unregulated, and the result is sinful life and degrading myself into lower forms of life, even down to lower planetary systems. But if I follow this karma kanda processes, I can achieve, celestial pleasures. Oh, I want to, enjoy a long life. Well, I can do some good pious deeds. And the result of that sacrifice will be life in the higher planetary systems where I might live for 1,000 years. I might have a very beautiful form. I can enjoy in the celestial gardens. I can fly in airplanes. These things can be had. So, to go to these higher planets, Prabhupada explains, is not through one's mundane scientist spaceships. That will not take one there. One has to go by the Vedic process of performing these sacrifices. And these sacrifices, the result is in one's next birth, they will be able to take birth in the higher planetary systems. So this is good karma leading to a good result. But we know, is it really good? Anybody celebrates going from the C-class jail cell to the A-class jail cell? Oh, I have TV in my room. I get to go outside 1 hour a day, and on Fridays they give me pizza. This is the best. Anybody speaks like this? If anybody did, we'd think, wow, they're foolish. They don't know that real life exists outside the jail. Real life is outside the jail. So this whole universe, material creation, is like a jail cell. Or a prison house, I can say. There are different classes of facilities. We're in the mid-level facilities. Yes, there are some higher facilities. But it's all relative to the spiritual world. Nothing. It has no real enjoyment. Yeah, relatively. So, one who experiences that, so-called higher enjoyment realizes it's still very limited and temporary. As soon as my good credits are used up, I go from the A-class cell back to the B-class cell. I can only stay for a little bit of time. Prabhupada writes, we are so proud of our fancy airplanes. Well, why the airplane must come back down? Because when it runs out of fuel, it must come back down. Like that, we can do all this good regulated sense enjoyment and try to get to the upper planetary systems. But it is just a temporary existence, and it's still full of dukhalayam shashvatam, misery and temporariness. Maybe less than what we see here. So we are not aspiring to get to the best jail cell. We're aspiring to get to the best place. And that is at the feet of Shri Radhakunj Bihari, where one experiences eternal bliss and happiness. So, this is, what we learn from Shrimadbhagavatam is a complete picture. When we have the complete picture, then we know where to go, what to do. Otherwise, we'll be wondering, but what about this? I hear about Vaikuntha, but what about Indralok? What about Brahmalok? What about those places? What's happening in Patalok that should, frighten me sufficiently that I don't want to commit sinful life? Okay, 5th canto, Shrimadbhagavatam will tell us. What about my practical duties? I have a job, I have how to manage my spiritual. All this is given in Shrimadbhagavatam with perfect examples. Maharaj Yudhishthira had a job. He had a wife. He had friends. He had society relationships. All these things that we say preclude us from, starting our spiritual life. But the reality is, our life has zero value until we bring Krishna into the center. And Maharaj Yudhishthira is one great example of many that we'll see in Shrimadbhagavatam. So if we want to read biographies of great personalities, just read Shrimadbhagavatam. And we'll see the path to these very beautiful experiences. And we'll see actually how to bring success to the world. Now there's this new move to make this board of peace.
Board of peace.
There's only one board of peace. It is those who follow Shrimadbhagavatam, guide society leaders on how to rule, and then there will be guaranteed world peace. Guaranteed. If you want to give the Nobel Peace Prize, give it to Srila Prabhupada. Because he gave the peace formula. And it actually works. How much peace there was in Yudhishthira Maharaj's kingdom? Complete peace. The kingdom was called unrivaled. Actually, if you study the activities of the kings of Europe, you see one common phenomenon. No matter what part of Europe you see that the kings were most often insane. And why? Think about it. They're constantly in fear of who is trying to take over their kingdom. And they know that often it starts from the inside. So which of their servants has been paid off to poison me? Fear. Which of the servants has been paid off to stab me in the middle of night? So how I can have restful sleep, how I can enjoy a simple meal. Constantly I'm looking over my shoulders. So that position is a horrible position. Think, the villager in the forest has no concerns, no fears. When they all living in a royal opulent palace, but that palace is full of people who want to take this away from me. So what kind of peace you can have? But Maharaj Yudhishthira, perfect peace. No rivals, no enemies, because of his perfect administration. Little bit on this, we'll continue this discussion tomorrow. Granthara Shrimadbhagavatam ki Prabhupada ki. Any comments, reflections, questions?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. It's always a blessing to hear you speak.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
I heard somebody speak on this behalf 7 years ago like this. They were feeling even the demigods having the same desires, but they're fulfilling in a proper way. And this is the problem even with the demigods. They haven't reached the ultimate of their life. So,
Yeah, you see, even the demigods, right? They have battle. They're in fear also. How much fear Lord Indra and the demigods have of the demons taking over their kingdom? Right? This is not a peaceful life. And we see that even, great personalities, like these devatas, they also lose their understanding of who is Krishna. They fight with Krishna even. So that's why the demigods ultimately, you know what they pray? Let me come to the material world. Because I am bewildered by the opulences here. Let me come to the material world so that I can take to bhakti, devotional service. So this is the process. This is the perfect. Even the demigods who have achieved opulences far, far, far beyond what we can even imagine are saying it's an obstacle to achieving real happiness. So let us, we even have a relative example here. If you ask, and there's been studies done, 100 people who have won the lottery and won millions and millions of dollars, and you ask them one question after like 5 years: would you rather have won the lottery or not won? Vast majority would say, better I had not won. It's inconceivable to us, right? Inconceivable. But we have examples right in front of us. Miserable. Miserable. So, the real path is... So now I remember, I don't know how, this conversation was between Ramananda Rai and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, asking these questions. And he asked, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Rai, what is real wealth? He says, I know of no wealth in this world,
Krishna Prema.
but remembering Krishna.
Nice.
Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki.